Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. I also like maths. So it can never be too long, I suppose, before talking about politics is also talking about political polling data. And here we are again. YouGov has carried out an interesting poll on how various politically minded groups of people are viewing the current state of Brexit. And there are some interesting little avenues that it takes us down. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there's so many things you could go into on this. And I think the importance of looking at this sort of data is, as many of us, certainly me, wants to rejoin the EU. Ultimately, we know in order to do that, we need public opinion to be much more on the side of that. And more specifically, the opinion of the members of the public that the government of the time, which right now is an extreme Brexit Tory government, will listen to. So the headline results, with the more detailed drill down later, 51% of Conservative voters think Brexit is going well, against only 5% of Labour voters who do. 45% of Leave voters think that it's going well to 8% of Remainers. 25% of the general public think it's going well. Now, with those percentages, don't assume that you take it away from 100% to get those who think it's going badly. There are always some who don't know or are otherwise neutral, quite a lot as well. We'll check those out later in the video as well. What I want to do first of all is compare a couple of those figures. And I don't mean compare Remain with Leave voters. Shouldn't it be obvious that more Leave voters would think Brexit is going well than Remain ones? Though it is interesting that fewer than half of Leave voters think it's going well. It's also, I'm not kicking off either with comparing Conservative with Labour votes. Obviously that, hardly anyone who votes Labour is happy with it is not really a surprise, and that a higher proportion of Conservative voters are. Now, what I want to start off with is a comparison of Conservative voters with Leave voters. Now, bear in mind when I say Conservative voters, just like with Labour voters later on, we're talking about people who vote for them. We're not talking about party members. Party members have more extreme views in general. We're talking about not the few 100,000, or in the case of the Conservatives, just over 100,000 party members. We're talking about the millions of people who vote for them. But I would never have believed this comparison. And I know it's not so vast that you could go, but still. See, I look at Conservative voters as fitting into one of three main types. Like, you've got the, as they like to call themselves, the Conservatives with a small c. These were more moderate Conservatives, the ones that are largely extinct in the Conservative Party now. They weren't generally impressed with Brexit from the start. Some were, many of them weren't. They're especially not impressed with Boris Johnson's subversion of their party. But they will still vote Conservative because they convince themselves that somehow it would be much worse to have Miliband, Corbyn, Starmer or whomever is leading Labour in charge. Apparently the stable government, strong economic growth and better policing, healthcare and education was a nightmare when Labour were last in power, apparently. But these would be largely Remain voters. There would be some Brexit voters amongst them, of course, but largely Remain voters. Decent chunk of them anyway. Then you've got the second group. I suppose they would be the Conservatives with a hard C. The jingoistic nutters who didn't need any special lies or propaganda to make them think they were inherently superior. And of course we'd do better on our own than as part of the successful Union of European nations. These will be Leave voters. Oh, yes. Then you've got the third group. These are people who, if you ask them, if you actually have a political discussion with them, you will find will not actually be in favour of Conservative policies at all. But they voted Tory to get Brexit done. Now, that doesn't make them all Leave voters, though many of them would have been. Some would be people who just despaired at the way Brexit was tearing our country apart and wanted it all to end. Remember the Conservatives' main slogan, get Brexit done, right? These are people who voted for them in the belief that if we just went through with it, if we just got it done, got it finished with, it's like, yeah, if you give me the option of voting it all away, so we'd just stay in the EU and cancel, that's fine. I just want it cancelled. They are the ones who, no one else was giving them the option to deal with it. Even though they were, but they weren't banging on about it. Even Labour, who were going to give a referendum And that would have taken place last year. And it's like, do you want this deal or do you want to stay in the EU? And it still would have been dealt with. But they weren't hammering it and they didn't have a good slogan for it. Conservatives were the ones promising to get it done within weeks. And they just thought, just get it done, get through it, and then the healing can begin. Like tearing a plaster off, just get it done quickly, and then we can move on. Yes, I know. But the point is, you have a group that may largely be made of Leave voters, but not exclusively. But the Leave voters are exclusively made up of Leave voters. So clues in the name. So you've got Conservative voters, 51% think it's going well. Leave, some of whom are Leave voters, some of whom were not. Leave voters, who were all Leave voters, because that's why they're called Leave voters, only 45% think it's going well. A higher proportion of Conservative voters. I find that fascinating. So then you have to sort of think, so what's a possible hypothesis for this? What explains this, and is it useful to know? Then I thought, well, what about this notion? So those who voted to leave in 2016 voted for a particular form of Brexit in their minds. But it is a form of Brexit that didn't actually materialise. For example, people voting leave in 2016 were told that we wouldn't believe in the single market. Well, we did. You know, it was supposed to include more money for the NHS. Well, it's less money for the NHS. You know, but the thing is, those who voted Conservative in 2019 voted for quite a detailed vision of Brexit. Yes, there were still some lies there, like no checks across the Irish Sea, or even though it was written down. But I mean, but that is the point. There was a legal form of Brexit that existed in a document that we could read. I know most didn't, but we could. Whereas there was nothing to read about Brexit, what Brexit meant in 2016. The result of years of negotiation was clearer in 2019. So those who voted leave did not all vote for a hard Brexit. But everyone who voted in 2019 for the Conservatives did. Does this explain why a higher proportion of Conservative than Leave voters think Brexit is going well? Is it because they are more responsible for it and feel more responsible for it? After all, we didn't leave the EU because of those who voted to leave. People moan about the people who voted to leave in 2016. Didn't leave because of that vote. We ultimately left because of those who voted Conservative in 2019. And when it comes to changing people's minds on Brexit, remember, a lot of people don't like to admit they're wrong. We can all, I think, identify with that. It's not nice. What's the first thing when someone says you're wrong? What's the first instinct? I know it's my instinct. It is, am I really? Is there a way around this? Because, you know, this will be true on both sides. Like, I stand here amongst the devastation that Brexit has wrought and understand that those who were fooled into voting the way they did will not like to feel responsible for this. So your brain convinces you it's something else that did it. I actually make a good decision based at the time. And I'd like to think to themselves, can't you just accept the fact that you were lied to? You were lied to, you know. But no, for some people, their brain convinces them it was actually the EU, or it was Remain. It was us, apparently, our fault. Or it was the buggy. You know, it's just how the brain works. When you've done something stupid, your own intellect falsifies the documentation and plays with your memory. You know, it's like sometimes when you make a quick decision, you've got different parts of your brain. The part of your brain that can make quick decisions doesn't make good decisions. The part of the brain that makes good decisions is very, very slow. But sometimes in a stressful situation, you make a quick decision. We need this for evolutionary purposes to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. We haven't got time to think about what's the best way to run or, you know, the best routes to get us away. It's like it's disemboweled us. We just have to run, you know. But Brexit supporters think that rejoiners such as myself are suffering from the same brain-related smudging of historical facts. And this is the worry. You know, and I'm not a psychologist. I can't talk about this in any great detail. But the worry is that many of those who voted for this genuinely don't realise that they voted for this. You know, they're not conscious of the reality of the situation, so get exasperated when we just keep calling out all the terrible Brexit consequences. We had the Daily Express moaning the other day, saying that the BBC on the anniversary of the referendum, the 5th anniversary, didn't name a single benefit of Brexit. And it's like, I can get the impression that whoever wrote that piece in the Express knows what they're doing. But the readers who are reading it will have gone, yeah, that's disgraceful of the BBC. They didn't name a single benefit of Brexit. Do you think that's because there aren't any? Is that maybe the reason? But for them, that's not it. So it's proof, not evidence, proof of bias in the BBC. They didn't name any benefits of Brexit. Why wouldn't they name benefits of Brexit unless they're biased? That's the way the thinking goes. And because Conservative voters are more responsible than Leave voters, because the latter never had any details on what they were voting for, maybe that explains why a higher proportion convinced themselves that Brexit is going well. So that was the standout comparison for me. But there were also others of interest, like comparing the general public and Conservative voters, another useful one. I say that because we have no serious chance of changing government until 2024. Yes, Labour say they are preparing for 2023, but if the Conservatives have a general election in 2023, it's because they are sure they will win. If Labour sort themselves out in time for 2023, there will not be an election. So we have to accept that it will be this Brexit Party government that is running the show for the immediate future. The only way to steer them to anything like progress is with public opinion. But whose public opinion? Obviously, they don't care about Labour voters because they're Labour voters. One mistake that some in Labour make regarding the Red Wall is because a majority there voted to leave, that Labour need to adopt that position, or at least not annoy them. But you don't win seats with a majority of voters. The majority of Labour voters voted Remain and still want to rejoin now. You just need more votes than anyone else. But the problem is at the moment with Labour trying to at least not annoy the people who, let's face it, are voting Conservative now, they're actually putting off those who would vote Labour. They ignored the Remain vote in 2019. They're still doing so now. But anyway, on to the voters who can change the government's mind. Only 10% of Conservative voters think Brexit is going badly. Now, we can look at the 51 who think it's going well and think, well, that seems fairly evenly split, but it's not. 31% think it's neither good nor bad. That just means that they don't feel strongly about it one way or the other. So they're not going to put pressure on the government to do anything. Then another 7% just don't know. So you've only actually got 10% of Conservative voters who are not happy. That's not enough to worry them right now. Maybe come the general election, because they win a lot of seats by a small margin, maybe then 10%'s worrying. Although not enough to go against the 51%. Basically, there isn't a groundswell of the Conservative voting base who are turning against Brexit. Might be interested to see an identical poll after summer, but I really don't see anything that is going to change the government's mind anytime soon. But in terms of the general public, 38% think it's going badly, as opposed to 25% who think it's going well. Now, that's clearly a larger number that think it's going badly. And again, this is why rejoiners will make the point that there are more people in this country who are now anti-Brexit than pro-Brexit. And yes, that is clear. But that's not going to make the government change tack, because they're not interested in the overall public opinion, only the people who will vote for them or may vote for them. So it's encouraging, but it's also not an overwhelming figure. But given that Brexit is only going to get worse and we don't have either the media or the main opposition focusing people's minds on the harm of Brexit, there is every reason to believe that the number who think it's going well can only fall and the number who think it's going badly will increase. So then finally we come to Labour, and another weird comparison. So I compared Leave with Conservative. Now let's compare Labour with Remain. 0% of either group think Brexit is going very well. There's simply no serious support for Brexit within the Labour Party. And remember, these aren't party members, like I said. These are voters, millions of whom, most of whom, the vast majority of whom, 95% of them, are not party members. We have a few 100,000 members. Millions of voters. If we want to win the next election, we're probably going to need about 12 million Labour voters. Don't be fooled by a noisy minority who are amplified by being members. 0% think it's going very well. 5% think it's going fairly well. But 8% of Remain voters think it's going fairly well. Another weird surprise. That a higher proportion of actual Remain voters think it's going well compared to Labour voters, who are a mix of Remain and Leave voters, albeit heavily Remain. Isn't that odd as well? On the going badly front, we see the same pattern. 68% of Labour voters think it's going badly, but only 66% of Remain voters. Like, if you took away the labels at the top, you would have swapped around the Remain and Labour figures, wouldn't you? I would have done. What we're seeing here is that Conservative voters are more pro-Brexit than Leave voters, and Labour voters are more anti-Brexit than actual Remain voters. Now, to be clear, anti-Brexit in this case doesn't mean rejoin us. Not everyone against Brexit, not everyone who regrets it, wants to rejoin right now. Again, all part of that fear of reopening old wounds. But anti-Brexit nonetheless, and so in favour of a different Brexit deal, a different Brexit path, one that would mean closer alignment with the EU. So look at those Labour figures and then wonder, with results like that, why the bloody hell are Labour not all over this? They have overwhelming support to attack Brexit from their own voters. It would be something where in the public's mind they can really mark themselves out as fundamentally different to the Conservatives. Occupy a hill the Conservatives don't want to touch. I did also see another poll suggesting that younger people feel more strongly about the issue than older people. Younger people largely voted Remain and are pro-European. Older people, largely, not exclusively, I get told off for this, not exclusively, but largely voted Leave and tend to be less pro-European. But older people don't feel as strongly about the issue as younger people. Now, given that Labour get more support from generally pro-Europeans and younger people, they're both demographics that largely support Labour, aren't they storing up a world of failure to represent if they don't sort themselves out before it's too late? Because you're not representing the Remain stroke rejoin groundswell within the voting public, and you're not representing the young. It sounds like a bit foolish from Labour's point of view. But that is my initial reading of the results. That went on longer than it probably should have done. There is much more I could do, but don't worry, I'm not going to. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.